Okay. Random, we can speak. Okay, so we are back. Am I audible now clearly?
Yes.
Okay, sir. Okay. As I was mentioning, Mr. Brandon, Dr. Brandon, has been cited over 1,000 times. He mainly teaches organizational ethics and behavioral related courses at both the UG and graduate level at Texas A&M University Commerce. He is also a very well-established consultant, consulting in the public sector, ranging from local municipalities all the way to larger defense-related contractors. He serves as the editor-in-chief for the journal Management Decision, which is a partner journal of the conference. It is an Emerald Journal and Scopus Quartile 1 and has a great track record of over 55 years. It started in 1967 and they recently rolled out their 468th issue. Mr. Brandon has had several awards. He was nominated for the Texas A&M University Commerce Research Scholarship and Creative Activities Award, Fearless Investigator 2020. He also obtained the Emerald Award for Excellence, outstanding in contributing for outstanding author in research in ethical issues and organization. He also was nominated for the Texas A&M University Commerce Lafferty Research Award 2008 and has, in addition, received awards from SAGE for its Best Management History Division in Leadership. Mr. Brandon, thank you so much, Dr. Brandon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
This is indeed a terrific topic to take on. Many of us struggle with publishing in high quality journals, and who better to tell us all about it than you, sir. I hand over the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the warm welcome and introduction and opportunity to speak with you. As your conference is on ESG, it is a topic we publish in Management Decisions, so I wanted to discuss the journal with you a little bit. I want to first start with just an introduction of the journal, then talk about, as you suggested, how to publish a management decision. So let me progress my slide here. So as was mentioned in the introduction, Emerald did actually begin with Management Decision. It was their very first journal that they began. The company began in 1967, so Management Decision was their first journal. So we've been around for quite some time and have published on management science over all those years. And more recently, we've gotten into topics like ESG. We are the oldest management science journal, not the first that ever existed, but the one that's currently still running to this day. And as I'm going to show you, our impact factor has been increasing quite a bit over time. So more people are reading the journal, citing the journal. We're an international multidisciplinary general business journal, but we always like to bring it back to the manager. So we're management focused. But of course, managers are interested in a lot of different topics in terms of running a business. And I'm going to talk more about some of those topics here, but all the way from finance to even more organizational psychology issues we're interested in. And the emphasis really is on how can we implement the things that are being researched in terms of managerial decision making. So once again, we like to bring it back to the manager, which makes it a bit unique in the publication space. Let me just show you the stats so you can get a sense of Management Decision. So the new impact factor should be coming out within days, really. Usually it comes out very end of June or beginning of July each year. So it's always a year behind, but since it hasn't come out this year yet, the newest one we have is 2021. So the 2022 impact factor will be coming out very soon. And based on our current numbers from the previous year, we track the number of people that are citing the journal and reading the journal, those kinds of things. I believe it will even go up higher than this. So we have a pretty good impact factor. We're doing pretty well in our site score ranking, which is just another way of looking at the journal. So overall, a 10.0 is a pretty good ranking there. So I wanted to show you the citations here. So you can see 2022 is what the new impact factor will be based on, that it is higher from 2021. So that's why I do expect our impact factor will continue to increase when it comes out in a week or so. And that's also reflected in our citation factor, which is different than impact factor, but definitely related. You can see that that has gone up as well for 2022. One thing that's important to consider is submissions for a journal. So when you're looking to publish in a journal, it's good to know how many people are submitting to it. And then of course, that's going to be reflected in the acceptance rate, which I'll show you in the next slide. But you can see here that our submissions are increasing over time. So we go from 2019, our first submissions, the first original submissions was 1295. And then last year we had 1657. Of course, if you include all the other revisions that we're receiving, last year we had over 2,000 submissions in total. So we do get a lot of submissions, and in that case, we have to desk reject, which I'm going to talk about. That's the only way that we can be able to process that many papers, is to desk reject. So if we look at our acceptance rate, it tends to hover around about 10%. So 90% of the papers that are submitted to the journal are rejected. And that rejection can either come through a desk rejection of those two in just a minute here. But you can see, if you just glance at these numbers, that once you get a revision, and usually the first revision you would get, if you get a revision, would be what we call a major revision. So there needs to be a lot of work done to the paper. Your chances increase quite dramatically that it will eventually be accepted. So if you do get a revision, I would take it very, very seriously and try to do everything you possibly can to get it to advance further. Because even with a major revision, is not a guarantee that it will be accepted, but it does increase your odds quite significantly, as you can see with these numbers. The other thing that's important to consider in submitting to a journal is how long does it take for them to get you feedback? Since you can see that our submissions have increased quite a bit over time. If we go back even a little further, just another year or so, really we've doubled in our number of submissions over about a 5-year period of time. And so, we've been trying really hard to keep our good numbers that we had in 2019 there, when our submissions weren't quite as high. It's difficult. We've gained a little bit of time in the final decision, so about an average of 92 days there, and time to first decision 58 days. So you really are looking at 2 to 3 months before you're going to hear back from the journal. And I know that's the part, as someone who publishes research myself, that's difficult. But as part of the game that we're playing with publishing. And we're on my end, we are trying all we can to try to keep the flow of papers as much as we can, and also trying to give feedback that's useful. That's the other thing that you want to look for as a publisher, getting feedback that's useful, so at least you can revise your paper. Even if you get a rejection, at least you can get some feedback, revise your paper, and then submit somewhere else. Really, the worst thing you can do is to completely ignore the feedback you're getting, even with a rejection. Because if the point is to publish it at least somewhere, I would take all the feedback you can get from any source you can get, so that you can continue to make the paper better. And that's just true with all writing, whether it's academic or otherwise. It's a process that takes time for it to be good. The first things that we write, at least for me and for everyone I know, might not be that great, but through revisions and feedback and revising again, the paper starts to become better. I wanted to also show you who publishes a management decision in terms of the top 5 countries. Obviously, if we expanded this list out further, you would see that we truly are an international journal. We publish, have people publish from all over the world. But you can see here, India is there in the top 5 in terms of who publishes a management decision. We have Italy, China, United Kingdom, and United States. So these are the most common countries that people are going to come from who publish a management decision. Another way of measuring impact that Emerald is very interested in is how can we look at whether this research that we're doing has an impact in what you could call the real world. And so they'll look at things like social media, news blogs, other types of sources like that, such as print media, and then things like policy and patents. And you can see these are actually the top 5 papers that have made what they call a real impact. So the other side of it we're interested in as well, in terms of, is the research that you're publishing useful for real managers in the real world? So any way that you can tap into that and try to make it relevant for something that will help real managers is something we're interested in for papers we publish. So let's look at the rejection side. Like I said previously, desk rejects are going to be the most common type of rejection that we give, given the volume of papers that we have. And we desk reject really up to 50 to 60% of what we receive. So I looked at this just out of curiosity. This is definitely qualitative look at it. In management decision, you have 2 different times in which you can be desk rejected. So the way we're set up is when you first submit to management decision using our Scholar One portal, it will first be routed to what's called our senior associate editors. So that's who it's routed to first. We have 3 that do this. We have a 4th one that does something else that I'll talk about here in a minute. But the 3 that look at the new papers that have come in, they're taking a more broad-based approach. So looking more generally at the mechanics of the paper. And then if they think it has some promise, what they do is they send it to associate editors. So we have 17 associate editors who are experts in specific topics. So the topics they're expert in, they'll receive that paper. And then they can also decide to desk reject. So that's the 2 different times in which you can be desk reject, either by the senior associate editors or the associate editors. But if they don't desk reject, that's when they're going to send it on to peer review. So if we look for the reasons for these desk rejects, these are really the top 3 main reasons. The first one is just simply that the topic that you're submitting to management decision just isn't something we publish in. For one, it needs to be a business paper of some sort, business science paper. And for another, it needs to have some kind of application to managers. And so, those are the important things that we're looking for there. The second reason really has to do with the theory of the paper and or the research. So the design of the paper in terms of the research. We are a management science journal, so we believe that science is based on the work of others, that science builds off of the work of others. It doesn't, and it really shouldn't develop independently of the current research that's out there in the area, because we want to build off of others. So if you're not aware of what has been done in that area that you're doing your research in and providing the theory as the base, it's really not something we're going to be interested in publishing, since we are a management science journal. The third one is also actually pretty basic, just simply the expected writing and professional standards when you're doing science. Science needs to be done carefully, because otherwise errors can easily slip in. And so the point of doing it in a scientific way is to try to avoid, as much as possible, it's impossible to completely avoid it, but as much as possible, avoid errors and more subjectivity in the process. We're trying to eliminate those things so we can see what's actually going on beyond the biases that we might have in our personal perceptions. So one good indication that maybe there's problems is that maybe the English is poorly written, maybe the citations are not done correctly, there's citations missing, the format that we want to have for the journal hasn't been followed. So just really basic things that you have control over. These three things you do have control over, even though it's not easy and it takes a lot of hard work to do these things. But this is a way to avoid desk reject if you do that hard work up front before you submit the paper. So let's look at the other side of it. So let's say you managed to get past those first two levels of desk reject, and now it's gone out for peer review. And so the associate editor, if they feel like it has some promise, that's when they'll assign at least 2 peer reviewers. And those peer reviewers are chosen based upon their expertise in the topic area. And so if we send it out to the full peer review, and then we look at, well, why was it rejected then at that point? It's really a more detailed elaboration upon the desk reject reasons. So more specifically, the theory just isn't developed, the literature is not developed, you're not joining the academic conversation that exists in the journal management decision and in the discipline more broadly speaking. You're not really addressing a clear gap in knowledge. Once again, we're using a science-based approach here. So why would we care about your research? Why would we want to publish your research when it doesn't seem to be adding anything new to what we already know? We want at least something new there, some additional knowledge, new knowledge that's being contributed. And so in the end, there just maybe isn't that significant contribution to theory and research that we would want to make it something that would be publishable. The second reason looks more specifically at, I guess you could say, the nuts and bolts of the paper. So the design, the method, the stats. These are things that sometimes people might be really good in one, but not the other. And they might be really good in the theory part, but not so much in the design. Or they might be good in the design or the stats and not really do well with the theory part. But we want both to be done well, right? We want both to be done well if it's going to be publishable material. And the third one, which is very important for management decision, is the implications. Once again, at least for our journal management decision, which the name suggests, how can we help managers make decisions? How can the research that you've published or trying to publish help them make decisions in the real world? What's the application? How does it help the manager from their perspective? So once again, we want all three of these things to be well done. And then, even if all three of these things are well done, it doesn't mean that revisions won't happen. It's typical to go through 3 revisions at management decision. So once again, that's just how good writing happens. It happens through revision, and that's just what's required if you want to publish. The other thing I want to mention is that's important for really any journal you want to publish in, is to look once again at the website and look at what they publish, even the type of papers they publish, because that's going to hopefully influence which maybe even section of the journal you're applying to, because a lot of journals often have different sections, and your paper might be more relevant for one section over another. So let me just talk about these here with you to get you a sense of this different types we do in management decision. A lot of what we publish are going to be under 2 types, either presentation of new data. We do publish a lot of one study papers, but I will tell you that your chances for likelihood of being published are going to increase if you can have more than one study in your paper. And that can even include something like a pilot study, where you're showing that the methods you're using are valid. That through a pilot study, it seemed to work out, and then you do maybe a full-blown study after that. Another thing that people can do is maybe do a more laboratory-based study for one of them, and then the second study more of a field-based. That's also a good combination. So the reason why your chances are going to increase is because it just shows that it's more scientific, that it's more objective, that you're following the logical flow of testing the ideas. The second type that is most common, so like I said, these 2 are the most common, the new data, is the theoretical. And so theoretical papers, you're not presenting new data per se, but you're reviewing past research, but not in a descriptive way. You're reviewing it to create additional hypotheses or propositions, whatever word you like to use better, that you're actually trying to predict additional connections or additional understandings of the research based on what was done in the past. So it's an extension of the ideas, not a summary of the ideas. That'd be a more theoretical type of paper. Now, we do publish a lot of different types of theoretical papers, even philosophical based. But I will tell you that your chances for being published with this type of paper are going to increase quite dramatically if you conform to what we call Academy of Management Review. That's what AMR stands for, Academy of Management Review style. Academy of Management Review is basically the top theory paper in the management science. And on our website, I actually give you links to where you can get information about the Academy of Management Review style. On their website, they have detailed information about how you develop theory. So the reason why this would increase is your chance if you follow this is because it is, I guess you could say, the gold standard for theory development in management science. So that's what I'd recommend there. We do publish some other types though, and the other types might include either new data or theoretical papers. One is we have a new lit review section. So typically we don't like to publish too many lit reviews if they're only descriptive based. This is the exception. So since we have been around for over half century, we feel like there's a lot of information that has been covered across those, now we're starting our 56th year, that is useful. And so the topics we've covered across those times are varied: leadership, strategy, marketing, operations, human resources, decision-making. But the idea is that you would choose one of these topics that have been covered across those 56 years, and provide a review of that. Now, that's not where you would stop. You would provide that review, then you would provide a general review of how that topic has developed in the discipline or literature, more generally speaking, and then come to some conclusions as you compare the two. How has it developed across time in the journal management decision, and how does that compare to the discipline, more generally speaking? Now, this is not something that is a bibliometric type of review. This is going to be more of a systematic type of review, or I guess you could say a traditional type of literature review. We actually did already do a bibliometric review of management decision last year. So we published that in issue 8 of last year. And that actually can be a good place to start if you look at that paper to thinking about writing a paper like this. Now, this is not a special issue. This is something we just will be publishing in regular issues. And so you would submit this as a regular type of submission, but you'd want to include in your cover letter that you're interested in this section in particular. So it is an option there that is a little bit less a theory paper and more of a literature review paper. We have another new section that we've started. Management decision really did begin as a practitioner-based journal. We've become much more science-based over time, but we feel like there's still room for that practitioner-based type of paper. And as is true really between a lot of practice and science disciplines, there's a gap there. So practitioners really do have need of actionable insights. And organizations really aren't limited to just business. So even not-for-profit, we're interested in. So all different types of organizations we have an interest in for this in motion paper. Typically, our papers have a max of about 9,000 words. If you're interested in this new section, it's only about 3,000 words. The idea is that we want to identify timely topics, cutting-edge discussion that contribute to not only management research, but provide actionable implications and lessons for managers. That's the point of it. Let's try to speak in the way that practitioners could understand and provide them something that would actually be useful to them, that they could use and implement into their organization. So if you're interested in that, there's a lot more information about it on our website. And if you have questions, you can email me. The last one is special issues. So if you go to our website, which I listed there, there's a whole section on different special issues that we have. And some of them are particularly relevant to the topics covered in this conference. So I'd recommend going there and looking at those if you're interested. The thing about special issues is your chances of acceptance do slightly increase because the pool of papers is smaller typically. The only caveat to that is that if your paper really doesn't fit the call for papers, you really got to read that call for papers closely. If it doesn't fit, it's probably going to be an automatic rejection. So if it really doesn't fit, and the fit is maybe tangential, no, it doesn't really fit, you're just trying to make it fit, that's not a good strategy to use because it's probably going to be desk rejected. But if it does fit the call for papers, then it is another good option for submitting. We just had a conference on this in Europe. So we do have different conferences that we'll have. In 2024, we'll probably have a management decision conference associated with the European Academy of Management. So you can look for these in the future, but we have a LinkedIn group if you're interested in getting information like that over time. Anyone's able to join. We have a lot of associate editors that are on it, and editorial board members are on it. I typically do publish something there or put something there about once a week. Our current stats, maybe current special issues that have just opened, conferences, things like that are put there. So if you're interested, feel free to join. And there's my email if you have any questions. And I think we can open it up for questions if that works for the schedule.
Yeah, sure, sir. So we are throwing it open to questions. In case you don't feel like asking a direct question, but rather type it in the chat, you could do that as well.
Yes. Let's see. Oh, there was a chat that came up to share my mail ID. I'll
Yes.
just put it in the chat box. It was on the PowerPoint, but I'll just put it in the chat box as well.
And they can contact us. We'll facilitate that as well.
Okay. I'm happy to share that PowerPoint as well if that's useful for people.
Yes, sir, please.
I'll email it to you and then you can share
Yes.
it.
Yes.
But there's my email. I always do respond to all my emails, but sometimes it takes me a little bit of time because I have a lot of emails, as we all do, right? So don't give up if it's been a few days and I haven't responded, because I do always respond to my emails.
So I'll just ask you a very basic question.
Okay.
So obviously, management decision has evolved over time and become a premier publication in its domain. So as a researcher, early stage researcher, starting out, right? How do I aspire? I mean, right now, probably not there to publish in a journal like yours, but how do you aspire, I mean, to publish in a journal like Management Decision? What are the basic steps do we need to take to get there eventually?
Yeah, that's a good question. Really the most basic thing you can do if you're interested in publishing in a particular journal is to read the journal, right? So, at least I would say at least the last maybe 2 years of the journal, read it and look at the papers that are there, look at the topics they cover, look at how they cover the topics, how they develop theory, what kind of stats are they using, what kind of methods do they use. I think that's the most basic thing that you can do is just read the journal, at least the last 2 years or so. Look at everything that's been published, and that gives you a sense of if it would be a good fit for you, and it also gives you a sense of things you can cite, in your paper that relate to the topic that you're trying to cover. And then, of course, expanding the literature review out from that. So, I would say if you're probably interested in publishing a particular journal, make sure you're actually reading the journal. We get a lot of submissions that the reason really they're getting rejected is because they seem to have really no knowledge of what's published in our journal and the literature that is relevant to their paper. If we have papers that are relevant, they should be cited, because it shows that you're joining the academic conversation, so to speak. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Are there any further questions? So there don't seem to be many more questions.
Okay.
So we thank you once again for.
Oh, thank you. And let me just say one other thing. Like I said, the topic of this conference is something we're very interested in management decisions. So, make sure that you consider this as a possible outlet, because we're interested in these topics. It looks like another question did come in here on the chat. Let's see.
Yes, sir. So is there an open access model available, or is it just a closed access type publications? What the question is, I think, is what
Yeah,
the
yeah, publication fees. We don't have any required publication fees unless you want to do open access. So we publish 13 issues a year. 12 of the issues are just regular, no publication fees. Our 13th issue, though, is an open access. So if you want to be published, and you go through the exact same review process, actually, so there's nothing different there. But if you want to be published in the open access at the end, then there's fees for that, but it's definitely not required. And to be honest with you, when we're doing our reviews, we don't even know whether someone has made that option. So it has no consideration at all in the review process. So don't think that it's going to increase your chances if you pay us money. It won't. It won't increase your chances because we're not even aware of it on our side. That's on Emerald's side. But that's a good question.
Sir, I think there's one more question on literature reviews. How do you go about doing reliable literature review?
Very, very good question. So we just to back up from that question in a minute, because I didn't talk about it. We do publish both quantitative and qualitative papers. So we publish both. The qualitative sometimes can be a little more tricky because it needs to also be scientific, right? So it has to follow the same rules. I wrote an editorial last year about publishing in that over 50 years literature review thing. And so I do have some citations in there that can be good in terms of how do you write literature reviews, whether it be qualitative, and really a literature review is kind of a little more on the qualitative side when you're following that process. So I can, if this person will email me, I can send them that paper, that editorial that will give them all that information. So feel free to email me and I'll send you that editorial. It was published last year. I can't remember the issue. I think it was an issue 5, but I'm not positive. But I have the paper and I'll just send it to you if you email me.
Sure, sir.
Thank you.
Well, so it looks like that's it for now. Thank you so much for taking your valuable time.
Oh, there's another one that popped up. The question is, what is there much literature as newly emerging field? Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in the literature review thing that I talked about, it's really looking at the topics that have been covered across those 56 years, now 56 years. And so it's true that maybe newer topics weren't covered back then wouldn't be appropriate for that type of paper. You'd want to publish that as just a regular paper, a data paper or a theory paper. So yeah, it just depends on, once again, making sure you're choosing the right section of the journal to submit to.
One more question has come on the formatting. So each journal like Emerald has a very specific format. So what are your views on that and how publication?
It's always, whether it's Emerald or any publisher, you do want to make sure you've read the website carefully for things like formatting. And, those things can be worked out a little bit in the review process, but for your first submission, it's really the implicit message that the paper brings. So if you haven't paid attention to the details, the underlying message is sort of, maybe you didn't pay attention to the details in other places, right? In the research or the literature review. So I would say do your best to format it correctly, because it just is a way to put your best foot forward, so to speak. It just shows that you are a serious scholar, that you care about the details.
So one more general question has come on plagiarism in general, but what is your allowance limit, I would say, for plagiarism that you look at? I think that's something you're very serious about, right?
Oh yeah. So the way it works with Emerald typically is before they'll publish anything, they run it through the different programs they have, Grammarly and different programs like that. And so it, has to pass those, and those programs have a very vast database that they're comparing to. And so, really it's almost impossible to plagiarize if you're plagiarizing from published material, either published on websites or otherwise. So, it's the best thing to do is just to put things in your own words, right? I mean, that's just the best thing to do. And if you can't figure out how to put in your own words, make sure that you have citation quotes around your material. Now, you don't want to have too many of those because it suggests you might not understand the information, but it's really not, all that difficult to avoid if you'll just try to put things into your own words. And I think typically I don't know the exact metric, but maybe if there's more than 4 words that are the same in a row, in the same context, things like that is kind of what they're looking for. But of course, our students ask us those questions as well, and we tell them just put in your own words, right? So our students ask that as well.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. I think that should be all for now. If there are further questions, I think you already answered the one that just came through.
Yes.
So if there are further questions, we will revert to you via
Thank
email.
you.
If there are any more that come to us, we'll run them by you later on.
Thank you. And I'll send that PowerPoint to you so you can share it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.